Hello, I am Jamie McKinley, and thank you for tuning in to another episode of Just Get a Real Job. I'm thrilled this week to welcome on the show Ruth Hollyman, who is an agent with Strangetown. The first time on the podcast after 108 episodes that we've actually had an agent on as well. So it's brilliant to welcome you on the show, Ruth. You're an agent of actors and have been involved in youth theatre and many other interesting things for a long time. So it's a privilege to have you on the podcast. How are you doing?
Oh, thank you. I'm really well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
No, it's a pleasure. I think a good place to start, I've sort of given you a bit of an intro, Ruth, but do you want to just introduce yourself to our listeners? Tell us a bit about Strangetown as well and some of the clients you represent.
Yeah, no problem. So I have been running Strangetown since it started in 2008. Originally, I set it up with my colleague Steve Small as a youth theatre for the young people in Leith, because we're based in Leith in Edinburgh. And it very, very quickly grew. So we started off with 17 teenagers in 2008. And then before long, we added another group and then another and another. And today we work with 180 young people every week. So we've got loads of groups, all grouped by age. But about 2 or 3 years in, maybe 3 or 4 years in, casting directors had heard about us and they kept coming to us with a view to some of our actors auditioning for professional TV and film projects. And this kept happening. So we were always trying to look at different sources of income for the theatre company and the youth theatre, because as you know, as a small arts organisation, it's really hard to secure regular funding of any kind, really. And so we thought, well, maybe we should do something with this. Maybe we should create an agency and formalise it, and then that could help fund the rest of the activity that we do. So we did. So when we first started, I suppose it was a little bit of an experiment. We didn't know how successful it was going to be. But it very, very quickly grew arms and legs. And so now, how many years on? I suppose 10, 11, 12 years on. That is my full-time job. So I no longer run any youth theatre sessions or direct plays. I solely run the agency and I have a full-time assistant because we've just grown and grown and our clients have more and more success. So to give you an idea, we represent people like Lewis Gribben, who won a Scottish BAFTA for his role in Somewhere Boy on Channel 4.
Super great
It's
series. Really good series.
such an amazing drama, really brilliant, so heartrending. And he is also going to be in the new TV series of Blade Runner. So that's coming up. He's been in Black Mirror. And then we also rep Rory Malika, who, like Lewis, is a Screen International Rising Star of Scotland. And Rory was nominated for a BAFTA for his lead performance in the film Sebastian and has just finished a run in the West End in a new play called Clarkston. And he's been nominated for Best Debut in the West End by What's on Stage Awards. So those are two big success stories. And we rep about 50 clients, and we have had people in various BAFTA nominated and BAFTA winning productions. You've probably heard of The Boy, the Mole, the Fox and the Horse, which also won an Oscar. So we rep Jude Coward-Nichol, who voices the boy in that. So yeah, our clients, because we started as a youth theatre, our clients range in age. At the moment, they range in age from 12 to 30. So we don't really say goodbye to them as they grow older. If they want to stay being rep by us, we're very happy to keep them. And yeah, a wide range of clients in that age range. But we're always looking for, I suppose, young ones to come up through the ranks. And we're all about developing new talent and giving Scottish talent opportunities that they might not otherwise have been aware of or had the knowledge as to where to go to get those opportunities. Yeah.
Yeah, no, there's so much to. Thanks for your introduction. There's quite a lot I want to ask you today. And what's interesting is there isn't actually a lot of sort of acting agencies that are based in Scotland either. You're like kind of flying the flag in a way for Scotland's agency. I know there is other agencies in Scotland, but it's nice that you guys have sort of come out of Edinburgh and have started to get some, international recognition as well.
Yeah, that is really exciting. And as I said, we are so passionate about giving opportunities to those that maybe wouldn't have had them otherwise. And There are obviously other Scottish agents as well, and we get on well with them. We have good working relationship with them too. Yeah, we pride ourselves on the nature of the projects that our guys get cast in, and that we've built these relationships with not only Scottish casting directors, but London and international casting directors. So we work quite a lot with America and Canada as well as the UK.
Yeah, well, one of my questions for you, Ruth, is actually going to be about how a person actually goes about becoming an agent, because it's like a sort of career. As I said, not had an agent on the podcast before. It's interesting the way that you sort of became an agent, because you didn't set out to do that originally. You were really interested in new theatre and helping emerging talent in. But what does an agent actually do? I think a lot of people probably wondering that, even actors that maybe want to get an agent, or writers or whoever. What does an agent actually do, and how do you go about sort of becoming one?
Okay. So I suppose I'll answer the first bit first. What we do is we try to get our clients, our actors, seen for professional work, and we try to get them auditions, whether those are self-tapes, which the majority of first round auditions are these days, tapes, or in-person auditions. So every day, faced with, I probably get about 150 emails every day that are a mixture of invitations for our clients to audition, to job breakdowns on Spotlight. And Spotlight is the main casting database in the UK that casting directors can post their job breakdowns on. So I will receive loads of emails from Spotlight with loads of different job breakdowns that I can look through and decide which ones are appropriate for our clients. I will also get directly in touch with casting directors and find out what projects they've got coming up. Likewise, producers, I've got good relationships with various producers, production companies. I always like to find out what projects they've got coming up, and if anything is suitable for our client base. Once those auditions come in, I'm then the person who will call the client and tell them that they've got an audition, talk them through the project, talk to them about the role, and make sure that everything's clear. And then we'll send out all the information for them to do the tape, usually, or to go to the meeting. And then usually, depending on the size of role, but usually there would be a recall stage that we help facilitate, set that up. And then maybe a chemistry read, where if it's a lead role, they'll need to get them in the room with the other potential leads to see if they've got chemistry, to see if they work together and work well together on camera. And then if they get the job, in the happy event that they do, I am then the person who negotiates their deal. So how much their fee is going to be. Obviously, sometimes the fee is kind of set. So theatre fees generally have less room for negotiation unless it's a massive big West End thing and the actor's got a lot of profile. But all the screen jobs, usually you can negotiate on those and try and get the fee to where you would like it to be. Obviously, if the actor has more experience, more profile, you've got more bargaining power. If they've got more credits under their belt, you've got more bargaining power. If they're just starting out, you have very little bargaining power sometimes. And then, so once the deal is sorted, which is a lot of back and forth, usually between me and the casting director, then when that's sorted, the casting director will pass me on to production. And at that point, the legal paperwork comes from production, and I will make sure that that's in a place that I want it to be. So I might challenge some of the clauses. I want them to be improved upon. And then once I'm happy with how that's looking, I'll send it to our client for signature. So I do all of that work so they don't have to, because it's a lot of legalese. And, why would an actor know exactly what all those clauses mean? So and there's trust there between me and the client. Obviously, I want them to read over it before they sign it. But yeah. And then once they get the job, the agent is still involved, especially if it's a younger performer, because you want to make sure that everything is as it should be when they're doing the job. So travel and all of that, we would be copied into the arranging of all of that. If they've got to travel to go away down to London to do the job or abroad. If they are under 16, they will need a performance license. So we will be involved in the arranging of that with their local authority. We check in regularly with a client when they're working just to make sure that they're happy with how it's all going. And if they had any issues at all, they know that they can contact me. Um, and yeah, so we like to kind of get copied into a lot of the email communication, I suppose, that's going on surrounding a job. So I'm very hands-on, which I think most agents are. I might be wrong, but most agents are just wanting to make sure that it's the best possible working environment with the best possible terms and conditions for the actor. Does that answer the question about
Yeah,
what an agent
it's so
does? Yeah, yeah,
yeah, it's so interesting because there's so much to your job. Like, I mean, from like helping find the talent that you want to represent, and then obviously like helping them get auditions to then the legal stuff. Like, did you have to learn some of that on the job, especially coming from your other
yeah.
background?
Yeah, absolutely. I did learn as I went along, which I think a lot of agents do. But I suppose usually, to answer the other bit of your question, if you're wanting to be an agent, usually you would start as an assistant to an agent and you would learn from that agent. Whereas I kind of jumped in and didn't have anybody above me. So I was learning as I went. But as I said, I've got really good working relationships with other agents, including in London. And I learnt a lot from them. They've been very generous, and we'd actually co-represent some of our clients with big London agents. So I've learned lots from them. You know, I think some people think that agents don't ever speak to each other, but we absolutely do. And we're also members of the PMA, the Personal Managers Association, which is specifically for talent agents. And that is a great source of support, information. If you've got any questions, you can go to them. You can communicate with other agents through the PMA as well. So say you've both got actors on the same job and you've got a bit of a query about a clause in their contract, you can put out a message and another agent who's got a client on the same job will get back to you. And that's a really good source of support and information. And equity are really helpful as well. So if ever, and I still do have questions, sometimes about particular aspects of a contract, then I can call equity and they will help me out, which I know other agents do a lot as well. So yeah, and also I suppose now our clients have reached a certain level. We do work, as I said, with America, so not just American casting directors, but American lawyers and other American agents. So we co-represent with American managers, and so we sometimes, if it's a big American project, then we would get an American lawyer to help out with the legal side of things there. Yeah.
That's so interesting. Do you think agents get quite a bad rep sometimes? Because there's that sort of Hollywood portrayal sometimes of like the mean talent agent or the agent that's like really
Yeah.
hard line. Because
Yeah.
imagine you sometimes have to be not tough, but if you're negotiating a deal, you have to
Yeah.
be able to like,
You do.
I don't know, have that business side.
You do. You have to be assertive. And I know what you're saying, that there is an image of agents being mean and hardline and all of that. And most agents that I've met have been lovely, and I think the relationship between an actor and their agent is really important. The actor's got to be able to pick up the phone and speak to their agent easily and not feel nervous about doing that. We really take the nurturing of our clients very, very seriously and want to be that supportive listening ear. Even if it's not something to do with a particular job, if they're just having a bit of a wobble or a bit of a phase where they're feeling down because they've not auditioned for a while, we are a listening ear in that respect. So the agent is a lot of different things. There's a lot of different roles. But yes, I haven't fully answered, I suppose, your question about how to become an agent. So I suppose now you would get in as an assistant to an agent, which is the best way to learn. And then, so doing admin and helping out, get all those auditions out there and the information out there and just learning about how the whole thing works. And then with a view to progressing to become an associate and then eventually have your own clients. Yeah.
No,
But
thank you very much for answering that, Ruth.
no worries.
I've got loads of other sort of agent questions, and some questions particularly that a lot of actors might have always wanted to ask an agent. But first, I kind of want to talk to you about your own personal journey into becoming an agent and how that, because obviously before that you worked in youth fair and stuff, but we always sort of ask our guests about their sort of growing up, their connection to the arts and stuff. Were you always interested in acting and the arts and theatre and stuff, or did you sort of get into that later in life?
I was interested from the age of about 11. Prior to that, I would always role play with my pals, but I think a lot of children do that. But, I was always putting on shows with my friends and for our parents in the back garden or whatever. But then when I was 11, I think I got cast as the little match girl in a Christmas production in my first year at secondary school. And I can remember absolutely loving it and thinking, this is what I want to do. I really want to be an actor. And so I went through school then, making sure I chose subjects that were, so I was lucky my school had drama. I was in England, a school in England near Manchester. I had drama O level and I was able to do theatre studies A level. And then I went to university and studied drama. So this was me. I was going to be an actor. I knew it was really hard. Didn't go to drama school. I remember auditioning for drama school and got recalls a couple of times, but then I didn't get in. But I was only 17, 18. It's really hard to get in at any age, but at that age, it's particularly difficult. So then I got onto a drama course at Birmingham University, brilliant course at the time, which still is a really good course, but we were so lucky because there were only like 20 people in our year. So we had so much attention and, got to do so much. And it was fab, 3 years. And then at the end of that, somebody who was also graduating with me, she said, do you want to form a theatre company with me? So this wasn't Strange Towns, pre-Strange Town. And we did. We just jumped in. And at that point, there was this amazing thing called enterprise allowance that the government would give you money to basically set up your own thing, your own business. And you could also claim housing benefits, so your rent was paid. And, it was just a completely different setup.
That sounds like almost utopian now for many artists.
Yeah. So I don't remember having to do like another job because we were given this enterprise allowance money. I mean, it wasn't a lot, but it was enough. And because our rent was paid, that was a huge, huge bonus. So we did that in Birmingham for a year, and we did lots of, we worked with writers because our course at uni had a playwriting course alongside it. So we worked with them, and they wrote some plays for our company. So there was about 4 or 5 actors in the company, and my friend Lisa was the director. And we somehow managed to get like tiny little bits of funding to do theatre and education in schools. So we got little bits of funding to do that. We did workshops. I can remember that was because we're talking late 80s, early 90s, and HIV/AIDS was like a massive thing then. So we did a lot of a little play and workshops associated to raise awareness of sexual health, basically. And we did a tour in Shetland doing that, which is, it was the only time I've ever been to Shetland. And it was in December. I remember it was freezing. So we did that. And then the money that we would get from that, we put into putting on the plays. And we came and did the Fringe with a version of Liz Lochhead's Dracula. Actually, before that, we did a new play. We did a new play here, and it went really, really well. And then we got transferred to London, tiny little pub theatre in London. But we did all of that. And then the next year we did Liz Lochhead's Dracula, by which time we had relocated the company to Edinburgh, which is what brought me here in 1992. I know, it probably makes you think, oh my God, I probably wasn't even born then. And so we ran the theatre company up in Edinburgh, but it was really hard financially. Even though we were putting on plays, we were getting really great reviews. We got a bit of funding to do a Highlands tour, which was amazing. But then slowly but surely, the others started to kind of fall away because they were finding the financial, not earning very much at all. They were finding it too difficult. So it kind of disbanded. And I remember thinking, okay, I'm going to see if I can pursue acting on my own and try and get an agent. But at the same time, I'm going to apply for arts-related jobs. And whichever happens first, that's what I'll do. Because I realized, I think at that point, I didn't know if I had the drive that you need to be an actor, the absolute single-minded determination that you need. And so I remember having a meeting with casting directors and with an agent and all of that. But then the thing that happened first was I got the job as the marketing trainee at the Festival Theatre as part of the opening team in Edinburgh. So the Festival Theatre had been the Empire Theatre and then was being completely refurbished, and that's when they built the big glass frontage. It was a beautiful, and it still is a beautiful space. And I got that job and kind of said goodbye to acting at that point. So I would have been in my mid-20s when that happened. And then I absolutely loved working at the Festival Theatre. It was such a brilliant place to be part of the opening team was really exciting. The programming at the time, the general manager, Paul Isles, programmed a huge variety of everything to variety shows to amazing contemporary dance. I mean, that was where I learned about contemporary dance, and as part of the marketing team, I would go to every single opening night. And some weeks we would have 2 or 3 opening nights because some visiting companies would just be one night only. So it was very full on, but so much fun. I absolutely loved it. And then as I was working there, because I suppose I had done theatre in education and I could see how important that was. And the theatre had no education department, no outreach, no involvement with the local community in that way. So I decided that the theatre needed an education programme. And so I had to persuade Paul Isles, the general manager, who was an amazing, brilliant man, but he was very scary. I had to persuade him that the theatre needed an education programme. After much persuasion and a lot of arguing with him, he agreed. And so I was then promoted to education officer, and I started the very first workshops that were linked to the programming that was the shows that were coming to the theatre. And I got involved telling school teachers about what the theatre could offer them and started all of that. And then my partner, who is an artist, visual artist, got offered a scholarship to go and study in Tokyo. And so I had to make a decision. Was I going to stay building this education program at the Festival Theatre, which I'd been doing for about a year and been a marketing trainee for about a year and then was doing the education thing for about a year? Or did I have a complete change and go and live in Japan? And I thought, well, this is such an amazing opportunity and I'm still young and, I've always wanted to live abroad. So I just did it. Went to Tokyo and lived there for 3.5 years, which quite bonkers. And you're about to say, what did I do in Tokyo? Well, I just keep going.
Yeah, I mean, I'm also curious, like, if there was anything that in Tokyo that informs if the Japanese had an approach to the arts that you've taken back and used now in your career.
Kind of. I went there and initially all I could do was teach English because I didn't have any other way of earning money. And then I met people who were working as actors and doing a lot of voiceover work in English. So Americans, the odd Australian and the odd Brit, but mostly Americans. And I formed a little theatre company with 2 Americans, and we would do theatre in education, using theatre to teach English, really, in schools. And then I got a lot of voiceover work. So I voiced everything from documentaries to video games. So the character work was the most fun. I loved doing the video game characters. They were really, really exciting. And I presented on Japanese national TV. Hilarious. Which could only happen there. You couldn't easily get into, presenting on the BBC here. The competition's insane. But there, because they wanted a British English speaker for this particular program that was on NHK, it was an English education program. There weren't many British English people there, so I got the job. So I suppose all of that and my working with and being freelance, I suppose, for the first time as well in Japan and working with young people in using drama in that way and also teaching English and all of that did inform what I then came back to do, because I came back very passionate about arts and education, which I had been before because obviously I'd done the work at the Festival Theatre. But really, I liked the idea of being a freelance practitioner, getting different jobs in that field. In terms of the more traditional Japanese theatre and arts like Buto and Kabuki, I didn't have lots of experience of that. I maybe saw it once or twice, but that side of things didn't really influence, if that's what you meant when you asked. But it was more the kind of way of working that made me think, oh, I really want to have a variety of things here when I come back. So when we did come back, I then got into youth theatre work big time. So freelance for a variety of different youth theatres in Scotland, and primarily the Lyceum Youth Theatre, which had been set up by my friend Steve Small, who then I started Strange Town with a couple of years later. Well, how many years later? 8 years later. Came back from Japan in 2000, and we started Strange Town in 2008. So yeah. That
I
was a very
appreciate
long
you
answer.
doing all the. No, I appreciate you filling in all the history, taking us back up to the point.
Where we are.
An interesting question I want to ask you, and it's probably a nice time because obviously you started Strange Town in 2008. You've been an agent for many years now as well. How have you seen the arts and sort of creative industries change in that time? Because in 2026, when we speak now, it feels like quite a lot. It's very mixed. A lot of people are feeling quite hopeless, a bit bleak. Things feel very difficult. There's not as much opportunity for certain people. But then at the same time, there's a huge rise on sort of online content and people feeling very hopeful. There's a sort of, I don't know, a bit of a weird thing where people are taking more independence with their careers and sort of representing themselves almost as well. And then that's leading to them then getting an agent and doing quite well. But what's your sort of read of the creative industries at the moment from where you're sitting?
Yeah, for the screen industry has obviously gone through a huge upheaval, and which kind of started after the pandemic. So in the pandemic, once production was allowed again, which it was very quickly, the screen was the first thing to get back on its feet, because I can remember people auditioning as early as, and working maybe as early as May 2020, after we'd gone into lockdown in the March, just because the industry got all of its protocols in place and all of its systems to make that possible. And so there was this huge boom, wasn't there, in streaming content and loads of projects and lots of people getting cast in things. And that couldn't be sustained because I think there was a lot of money that was borrowed to enable all of that. And then when that bubble kind of burst, there weren't as many projects getting commissioned just because there was no longer the money to commission as many projects as as were able to be produced during the pandemic. So that did see a big contraction in the industry, and then that was followed swiftly by the writers' strikes, and that meant we're still feeling the kind of knock-on effect of that, a further contraction. So less projects out there and less projects being commissioned, therefore. So that's why a lot of actors have felt, oh, there's not as much as there used to be, which is true. I do feel like maybe we're seeing a change and that a slight upward turn now, that there's more projects coming through. There were definite quiet spells last year, and I'm not saying it's back to full pelt, but it does feel like this year has started quite busy. And I feel like Scotland is it's got a lot of filming up here, and there has been a lot of filming even throughout the pandemic. I think that's really exciting, and especially with the various studios that are opening up here and the support from Screen Scotland for things. I feel like the vibe in Scotland is quite optimistic. And I mean, generally, it goes without saying that the arts in general needs more funding. That's always been the case, and never more so now, because the benefits to people it's just they're so vast. You don't have to want to be an actor to benefit from the arts. It just enhances people's lives, and it allows us to look at ourselves and reflect back. And stories are so important, and people will always want stories. Yeah, arts funding could absolutely be in a better place. I have been reading things recently which I think the Scottish Government's budget has just been increased for arts funding. So that's good, but there can always be more. And the value that government needs to place on the arts, maybe it's changing slowly, but surely. But, because it's such a big industry, it brings a lot of revenue into the country.
Mm-hmm.
And I still do think we are fighting a battle to make people sit up and value that, the people in power. So, yeah, it's a funny time because it hasn't been easy, and I completely appreciate that there are a lot of actors out of work and who haven't been seen for a very long time. The truth is that there are too many actors. There just are. There are so many for the number of projects that are available, and competition is fierce.
Yeah, because it's interesting. I feel like I've noticed that myself watching TV regularly. Like quite big, well-known actors will be in a show, but they'll only be in one scene. Whereas
Mhm.
back when maybe there was more things being made, that would be a new actor that would get that
Yeah.
opportunity. And that's not having a go at those established actors. Obviously, they need to make a living, but I think that helps reflect it. But I appreciate you answering this as well, because you're in a position where you're seen regularly, like you're getting those emails through, and you probably hear about those opportunities more than a lot of people who aren't an agent will, just because of the nature of your job. So I appreciate you answering that question. I'm kind of curious to ask this. You'll be able to tell me about how this works, I'm sure as well. But how does casting work? How do from sort of you guys choosing a client to represent to them being seen by a casting director? How does that process work?
Well, if they are known to a casting director, then the casting director might come and say, "Would so and so please audition for this?" But if they're not known, and of course we do rep emerging talent, so we've got a lot of people who are just starting out. So we would try to get them those auditions. So we'll hear about the project and then we'll push them to the casting director. And when I say push them, I mean either I'll get on the phone and say, "You really need to see this actor for this job. Please, can you give them an audition?" Um, and would follow that up with an email with their materials. So their headshot, their spotlight profile, their reel, if they've got a show reel. If they haven't got a show reel, because they're just starting out, then we will maybe show some self-tape material that they've done in the past, just to give the casting director an indication of their ability. And then if they get the audition, that's when they usually will be asked to do a tape. Um, and or meet in person. But yeah, so the tape, they will then have to do that in their own time and in their own space and just using a smartphone, because smartphones' cameras are brilliant. And then that tape will come back to us through the software that we use, which is called Tagmin, which is brilliant software for an agent. And then we send that on to the casting director. So yeah, the casting director will then watch the tapes. So casting directors will obviously, they won't be able to invite every actor that's submitted to them to audition. They have to narrow down the submissions. And to give an indication, when I was saying there are too many actors, which is not a nice thing, is it? But so for a lead role for something, for a high profile telly, the casting director might get 1,000 submissions or more.
Wow.
I believe for Harry Potter, the recent new TV thing of Harry Potter, they had something like 30 to 40,000 submissions
Wow.
because they did an open call. So sometimes casting directors put on social media that they're looking for a role, and then they are inundated because people will just not just represented actors will send stuff.
Does that tend to happen more with roles for kids and stuff? Is that more common for kid actors than normal, or does it just depend?
I think it depends on the project and the nature of the role. So if they're looking for something very specific, they're likely to put it out on social media because there might not be loads of actors who meet that criteria, or loads of people who meet that criteria who are actors. And if they're looking for people who are not actors, because it's almost like street casting where you're wanting somebody who's real and raw and hasn't trained. And not that all of our clients have trained at all, actually, because a lot of them have learned on the job. But that's when they would do an open call. But also they might do it if they've got the capacity to plow through all of the submissions and all of the tapes that are coming to them through the open call, then they'll do it just in case they find the next big thing. So, and the open call can also mean not just going through agents. It can mean or posting on social media. It can mean going to youth theatres or going to school groups, and that's how they found Owen Cooper, for example, in adolescence. He wasn't represented as far as I know. He was doing youth theatre classes, and they happened to go in. We had people tape for adolescents. I mean, everybody taped for adolescents. It was, so yeah. It isn't just for children. I would say that I have definitely seen open calls for adult roles as well,
Interesting.
which I do think that's very
Yeah.
important.
I
Yeah.
think that's a big issue with the creative industries in general. I mean, even working in TV, that I feel that all the time, because often it's all about who you know or if you're, somebody, they recommend you, that gives you like that access, where if you're coming from particularly like a working class background and you don't have any contacts in an industry, you don't understand how it operates. One of the reasons I started this podcast is to help people navigate that, because it is a huge issue. But
Yeah.
if you don't have that, then you're automatically excluded. I think it's good when you do things like open casting sometimes, because it's how people get their big break, and that's why youth theatre and things so important as well, because even if you do that, you might not have access to an agent, but it just gives you that, it lets you into that world, I'm sure. I wanted to pick up on self-tapes as well. It's kind of part of the question I'd asked you, but I know quite a few actors, and I hear mixed things. Some people hate self-tapes. They feel like they've made things worse. Some people really like them and think that they've actually made it a more level playing field, because they don't have to maybe go somewhere like London to do an audition that they were never going to get or whatever. How do you feel about self-tapes since they sort of come about? Because they've only been around for about 5 or 6 years, haven't they?
Yeah, they have. I mean, they really came into their own during the pandemic for obvious reasons. We were, as an Edinburgh-based agency, we were getting self-tapes before the pandemic because the casting directors wouldn't expect actors to go down for a first audition and, shell out 100 quid on a train. Which therefore, I am a fan of the self-tape, because I feel like it has absolutely opened up opportunities for actors who aren't based in London, especially actors who are based up here, because it's a long haul to go down to London. So I'm a fan. I can understand why some people don't like them, because you are having to kind of second guess what the casting director is looking for, and you've done your tape and then that's it. Whereas if you're in the room, there's always the opportunity to work with the casting director and get given notes. If there's time, some auditions are super short, like 10 minutes, but the casting director would usually in the room give an actor a note to just to check that they can take direction so they can do the scene again. Sometimes with self-tapes, we encourage our clients, especially if it's been requested, but sometimes it isn't requested. But if it's a shortish scene, we will say to the client, give us 2 very contrasting takes, just so that the casting director can see that you're not a one-trick pony and you can do things, if you were being asked to do things in a different way, you can. So we do that. We don't just get the self-tape in and then send it off. I watch every single self-tape, and if it's not in a place where I want it to be, I'll go back to the actor and I will give notes and make it the strongest that it can be before I send it to casting. So I'm sure some of my clients hate that, because when they've handed in a tape and then they get a phone call, they're like, oh no, I'm going to do it again. But to me, I am never going to present a casting director with a below standard tape, because why would I do that? That reflects badly on the actor, it reflects badly on me as an agent. It obviously takes more time to do that, to give notes to a client, but I would always do it. So yeah, I think as a Scottish-based agent, I'm a fan of self-tapes, but I do understand why some people maybe don't like them.
I think one of the best things to come out of the pandemic, though, is that you can do like remote meetings and stuff more commonly, because I think that is really useful. I find it useful as a script editor, just being able to jump on a call with a writer, and you can have that. You know what I mean? If they're based somewhere else, I think especially in an industry where often opportunity is based on location. I think that it's really useful for that. Sort of as an agent as well, I'm sure lots of actors always wonder this, but how do you like look for talent to represent? Like, is there anything that stands out to you? I mean, it's obviously everyone has different skills and stuff, but is there any like common things that you look for when taking on actors?
Yeah, I would always be interested in somebody who is very different to anyone that we currently have on the books. So I'm very passionate about having a diverse range of clients on the books. So yeah, if they have a different heritage background, or if they have a very different striking look that's very different to anyone that we currently have, then I would be very interested. Obviously, they have to be really talented and have that special something that you can't really teach. It's kind of innate. If somebody's got it, they've just got it, haven't they? You know what I mean? If they've sent in a tape with a view to being considered, and they've just got this magical quality on camera and are able to do all of the thoughts as well as delivering the lines in a very, very truthful, natural way, then that would pique my interest. We are very, very mindful of not representing too many clients because we can't then give them the time that they deserve. So I'm very wary of having oodles and oodles of clients on the books. So therefore, we are very selective about who we invite to join the books. They do have to be, as I say, very, very different from anyone that we currently have, because otherwise you're then pitting clients against each other when you're trying to get them auditions. I will go and see shows. I will go and see youth theatre shows, school and college productions, in case there's somebody that stands out. As I said, we are, at the moment, we've got a little bit of a gap at the younger end. So, if I'd be excited to see, I don't know, a 12-year-old who can play down. So, because there are some roles which are looking for like 8, 9, 10-year-olds, but I know that casting directors always prefer actors to be older than that because they're just that bit more mature. They can take direction. So I'm always on the lookout for anybody who looks younger than they actually are, because that's a gift to a casting director. We are approached every single day by people wanting to be on the books by email, and we will always read the email. If they look interesting in a different way, then we might ask, if there's no footage already, then we might ask them to do a tape for us. And then if they've done a tape and it's brilliant, we'll invite them in for a meeting just to make sure that we get on with them and that they get on with us, and we can ask each other questions to see how we might work together. And then if we're happy after the meeting, we'll invite them to join. Sometimes we'll get a tape that we've requested and it's not quite there, but we give them notes to see if they can improve. And then if they can, then that's great. And if they can't, then we just say, oh, maybe go away and get some more experience and then maybe come back at a later date.
Would you ever say if somebody just wasn't the right fit for Strange Time, would you maybe say to another agent, like this person might be a good fit for your company? Does that sort of thing happen as well?
Yeah, definitely does happen. In fact, that has happened. I've definitely recommended somebody who I didn't feel was quite right for us, and they were signed by the other agent. Yeah.
It's nice to hear that sometimes, because obviously, like, people often sometimes think companies are in competition, but it's actually really good for the whole industry if there's a booming ecosystem, and it can help. It helps everyone out. I'm kind of, this question might be difficult to answer, but what are the sort of biggest mistakes? I know you work with quite a lot of young actors. Are there any like big mistakes you see actors commonly making?
So in general, I think the mistake would be thinking that they are definitely going to get the role and then being absolutely devastated when they don't get it. You have to stay real, and try to make that really clear when we sign somebody. We especially if they're young, if they're under 16, they need to be able to take rejection again and again and again. And so we always make that really clear to the child and the parent, or to the young adult, because if they're going into this thinking, I'll do an audition and then it's easy and then I'll get a role, and it just does not work like that. People can, even when people have been cast in something in a really nice job, it doesn't mean that the next job is going to follow. You might have a one job, 2 jobs, and then not have anything for 2 years. It can be as brutal as that. So I think that is the mistake, that people think, oh, I've got an agent now, so I'm definitely going to be a successful actor. Obviously, we will do everything we can to try and get them to be successful and on that path, but there is no guarantee. So if they can stay grounded and down to earth about it and real, and not be crushed by every rejection, because otherwise that way madness lies. You just can't, then you'd have to kind of give up if that's what was happening again and again. If you were being crushed and like devastated, you've just got to move on. I think a major part of the actor's job is to audition and be seen, whether they get cast or not, because the more auditioning you're doing, you're being seen by more casting directors, that you're getting on their radar. Casting directors, if they like you, will absolutely come back and get you to audition for another project. Casting directors champion actors that they love. Even if they're not able to cast them in that particular job, they will remember them. So I always say to the actors when they're getting despondent about not getting cast, I'm like, but you're auditioning, you are doing the main part of your job, which is to be seen. And getting cast is like the icing on the cake if that happens. But it is so hard to get cast. It's really, really, really tough. You know, we've had lots of actors repeatedly get down to the final 2 or final 3 and not get it, and then on to the next. You know, you have to be so strong to be able to cope. I couldn't do it. I absolutely could not do that.
No.
So I think that is a mistake, that people might go into it thinking, oh, I'm sorted, I've got an agent, I'm on my way. They've just got to be real about it.
Yeah, rejection is really tough, and so obviously a lot of people listening to this will know that if you're having a creative career, especially, like, rejection is a big part of it. It's an interesting thing you talk about, how the auditioning being the main part of an actor's job potentially as well. I think I sort of apply that to my own personal career, but also when I speak to many people that work in different parts of the creative industries, like, even if you don't get a job, that's always important to carry yourself nice by being a nice person, being respectful, like courteous, things like that. Because even if you have an interview or a meeting with somebody and you don't get that job or you don't get the part, like, they still might remember you, as you say. So it's like, I think those relationships are almost more important than getting one job in particular.
Yeah.
But yeah, rejection is really tough. How do you help act? Obviously that be a big part of you being an agent as well. Like, how do you help actors, like, deal with that rejection? Because you'll get more rejections than not, even if you're a big actor. Like, I'm sure, like, even somebody like Lewis Gribben, one of your bigger clients, like, you probably still get more rejections than you'd think, even as a bigger name.
Yeah, you just have to remind them not to take it personally, because it never is personal, and it's never about them not being talented enough either. It really isn't, even though the actor might feel that, but it isn't. It's to do with the jigsaw that the casting team and the director and the producers, because it's not just the casting director's decision, it's to do with them putting together this jigsaw and having all the pieces fit in the way that they all envisage and that they all agree on. So sometimes you can have a casting director fighting for an actor that they think is right for the role, but the people with the money don't agree. So then it goes to somebody else. But it's also, there are so many factors. So, you know, sometimes you might be auditioning for a role where you have to have a resemblance to those actors who are playing the parents or the sibling. And it might be that they've decided, oh no, we definitely need this actor to play the parents. So I'm afraid that person who's got down to the final 2 isn't going to get it because the other actor looks more like the dad or whatever. It's, you know, when it gets to that point, it's not, as I say, it's not to do with talent. So I have to remind the actors, look, it's not personal. You did absolutely brilliantly to get to this point, and they will remember you and they'll come back about another job, and they always do. But it's I always say, go away and be disappointed for a bit, but then put it behind you, move on to the next, and don't take it personally. Yeah, but it's hard. It's really hard to do
No,
that. Hard to
yeah.
compartmentalize it in your head.
It really is, and often if you're if you're doing any sort of creative passion as a job, like, it's part of your identity, so it's really hard to separate that from many people and not take it personally. It's a hard skill to learn. I know you've been singing for nearly an hour, so I've started to wrap things up, but another question I had for you was just, obviously I think there's a big push at the moment. A lot of people are making online content. You know, there's an opportunity for people to have that, build their own audience themselves and stuff. Do you think, in your experience, do you think that can be damaging to an actor, or do you think it's a good thing for them to embrace? I know it's probably hard to answer because it's probably very dependent in context and depends on the context, but do you think it's useful for an actor to, like, go, for example, have like a good like a TikTok or whatever that's promoting them and making them visible?
I think creating your own work is always a good thing, because apart from anything else, it keeps you creatively busy and active, especially if auditions for things aren't coming through. We've got various clients who have set up their own little companies, like making short films or writing. I think that's all really exciting and important and vital, and makes them a much more creative individual, and to have different strings to their bow is always really, really advantageous to them as a performer. But I suppose in terms of like having a lot of followers on social media, I suppose if you've created online content, I personally, I mean, it doesn't excite me, but I know that I suppose there would be certain productions that might look at, oh, how many followers has this actor got? That I do know that does happen on certain productions, but not all of them. You know, usually a team wants the best actor for the role. regardless of
Yeah.
whether they're massive on social media. But in terms of creating your own content and creating your own work, I think that is a really good way of staying sane as an actor. If things aren't being brought to you, then just, make it happen for yourself and develop your skill set, which I think is really good.
Thank you. No, I think that's a really nice answer, because I think it is something that it's a newer trend, and I think
Yeah.
people are often quite curious about it. It's something I get asked as well, and I'm like, if somebody's having a career in TV, they're like, "Do you think it's useful to have it?" And there's no right answer, but I suppose it depends what you're putting online as well. So again, if you don't want to be doing things that are controversial or, going to make you look bad. The other thing I want to ask you, Ruth, is just about Strange Town as we wrap up. Like, what are your sort of goals for the company? Like, where would you guys like to get to? Because you'd be really growing a lot in the last few years, which is great to see.
Yeah, just to keep doing what we're doing and getting better at it and providing as many opportunities as possible for the people that we work with, whether those are the actors or whether they are the directors, the writers, because we produce new writing, as well as we do lots of things, which I suppose in this interview we've not touched on all the things that Strange Town does, but we do. Continue to provide pathways into careers in the arts for all of those creative practitioners and the actors. And I suppose eventually to nurture new agents as well, because I can't do this forever, can I?
No, that'd be nice
There will come a point.
it'd be nice to maybe take some of the workload off you a wee bit as well. Maybe you can get more time to relax.
Yeah.
And you quickly touched on that as well. There's links to all the work Strange Town does in the show notes as well. Because we talked about it briefly at the start, like Strange Town isn't just an acting agency. You guys do like youth theatre, loads of great stuff. So there's links to all of that in the show notes, so people can go and find out more about Strange Town
Great.
there.
That's great.
And just to close off, Ruth, we always ask our guests to sort of give us some parting advice. So, what would your advice be? Firstly, to anyone who wants to be an agent, and secondly, to anyone that wants to be an actor.
Okay, if you want to be an agent, I would write to agencies to see if they've got any assistant roles coming up. And if they haven't, maybe offer work experience just to get an insight into how an agency works. And advice to being an actor: make your own work, yes. Get involved with a youth theatre. Get involved with as many performing opportunities as you can, whether that's in your school or your college, your university, society. Go and see as much theatre as you can. Watch as much film and TV as you can. Read about who cast the things that you like. Follow the casting director on social media, because then you'll be privy to open calls if they post on open calls. Find out about the industry. So, yeah, when you're watching those credits go up at the end of the film, Google the director, Google the casting director, find out what else they did, and then maybe watch some of their other work. Be aware of the industry. Go out and find out what online newsletters you can subscribe for free to things like The Deadline, which is the industry newsletter, which gives you loads of information about the industry. Creative Scotland have a wonderful opportunities newsletter that every week they send out workshops and job opportunities on it as well, actually. That's just 2 examples. Yeah, you can write to agents, you can write to casting directors. Don't expect to always get a reply, but absolutely. And if you are writing to an agent with a view to being represented, always send a photo just from your phone. Doesn't have to be professional. If you have any footage that they can see instantly, then that's always useful as well. It doesn't have to be professional. It can just be you doing the equivalent of a self-tape on a phone. I would say, if you were to do that, a kind of something with dialogue is always really useful, because a monologue, yes, gives us an indication of what you're capable of. But if you've got somebody reading off camera, we're not only hearing you deliver lines, but we're hearing you listen and react and think about what the other actor is saying, which is really important to see. So yeah, I think those are my key bits of advice.
Ruth, thank you very much. Before we close off, is there anything that Strange Town's doing that you'd like to plug as well?
Well, at the moment, the youth theatre is rehearsing for its shows that will be in June. So we've got a showcase of new writing that are more kind of scratch type performances with the younger groups that are happening in June. And then with the older groups, we are performing at Summer Hall. That might be an exclusive. That's only, I don't know if that's been announced. I need to check with my colleagues. And those are the new plays that we've commissioned.
Maybe by the time the episode goes out anyway, so there you go.
So that's the youth theatre. The touring company at the moment are having a bit of a hiatus because we have been touring a really wonderful play called Her around secondary schools, but that's having a hiatus at the moment. And it will be coming back, hopefully, if new funding sources can be found. And in terms of anything else that we do, well, just look out for our clients in the agency in Blade Runner and other exciting projects. I think some of the things that are about to come out imminently, How to Get to Heaven from Belfast, which is the same team that did Derry Girls. We've got the wonderful Cara Aitken will be in that, and that'll be on Netflix next month. If you like a bit of musical theatre, you could go and see our lovely Aaron McGregor, who's playing Artful Dodger in the West End in London at the moment, in Oliver. But yeah, I mean, there's a whole... I could go on and on and on, but I won't. I will stop. But yeah.
Great. And just to reiterate again to listeners, there's links to all of Strange Town stuff and clients, etc. in the show notes. Ruth, thank you very much. I really appreciate you giving me a bit of an insight into what an agent does and answering loads of questions that will particularly be beneficial to actors. Thank you very, very much for your time. And yeah, thanks for coming on Just Get a Real Job.
Not at all. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Just get a real job.